Welcome. It's really good to be with you this morning. Welcome to if you're joining online, either now or catching up later. 213 sleeps until Christmas. Has anyone done their Christmas shopping yet? Please don't say yes. We're starting a new sermon series today, and we're going to be working our way through the book of Matthew. And we're going to discover time after time how Jesus shatters our expectations, how the type of king Jesus is completely different to what anyone was expecting. So today we hear about Jesus' arrival. When I was teaching for a while, I taught in Scotland in Kirkcaldy, and one staff meeting, the whole staff were called together, and there was an important announcement. We were told there was a very special visitor coming the next week. And this wasn't just any visitor, this was genuinely someone we would have heard of, household name, A-list celebrity, we were promised. But they couldn't tell us who it was because the security implications were just too big to name this visitor. You can imagine the anticipation which built over the next week, the wild speculation which went on in the staff room as to who this would be. Would they turn out to be great? Would it be a bit of a disappointment? Well, I'll tell you who it was a little bit later on, just to make sure you pay attention. Matthew's gospel starts like this, much the same way, and it's building anticipation. Who is it going to be? Matthew starts his gospel, the whole New Testament starts with this long genealogy. And it seems an odd way to start the gospel, to start the New Testament. We didn't make Alfred read it this morning, but what we miss with our modern ears is some of the dramatic tension that Matthew is deliberately building. So it begins with Abraham, huge champion of the faith, the forefather of the nation. 14 generations pass, and seven's a really big number for the Israelites. That's 2 sevens, 14. We get David, King David, the greatest king of Israel, a man after God's own heart. 14 generations later, it's disaster. The people are in exile, and it seems like all their hopes have gone. Yet, whilst they are in exile, there are whispers, there are rumors and prophecies of a Messiah who will come, a promised Savior, a king who will bring about an everlasting reign which will know no end. 14 generations, we read the birth of the Messiah. Who is it going to be? If Matthew was a bit like a film, then these first couple of chapters are almost like the trailer to the film. And any good trailer, you can tell pretty quickly what kind of storyline it's going to be. Matthew, this is an epic. This is about a king promised of old. Who is it going to be? In our story today, we read of the Magi. And sometimes when we hear of Magi, we think of slightly hippie, old, bearded men riding camels. But they were so much more than this. At their peak, the Magi were a priestly and aristocratic caste. They began in the Babylonian Empire and they came to the forefront in Persia. And at the height of their time, they were the ones to choose kings. They were the kingmakers from the East. Several hundreds of years before Jesus' birth, whilst the Jewish people were in exile, the Magi heard of these prophecies. They heard of the promise of this great king who was going to come. And Daniel in the Old Testament even becomes the chief of the Magi. And so it is through their arts in astronomy, they look to the stars to see who to crown. And we read of them having traveled thousands of miles across desert and harsh terrain, all the way to Jerusalem, asking the question, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him. Who's it going to be? Just imagine what's pictured in their mind's eyes, having made that journey. Great royal splendor and magnificence. This is the greatest king who has just arrived. When King Charles III was crowned, World leaders were invited to come and attend. The greatest men and women of our age were just there in attendance. The coronation was marked with a public holiday for the entire nation. Over 20 million people in this country tuned in to watch. So, of course, when the Magi came, they came to the palace. They came to King Herod. They came to Jerusalem, the most important town, and they demanded an audience with the greatest. Who is it going to be? In my story from earlier, in Kirkcaldy, it turns out the promise of an A-list celebrity actually wasn't over-exaggerated, and we got this man come to our school. Anyone know who it is? Gandalf is the correct answer. He's also known for playing a minor actor called Ian McKellen, but this is Gandalf, and he came to our school for the day. In Matthew's story, the Magi get their great reveal at the palace after this long journey lasting for months. Who's it going to be? But they didn't find Jesus there. The thing about Jesus is he turns our worlds upside down, turns them on its heads. When we think of God and humanity, I wonder what kinds of images come to the forefront of our minds. Maybe it's a bit like this. The creator God who holds the world in his hands. That's an appropriate image. Psalm 95 verse 4, in his hands are the depths of the earth and the mountain peaks belong to him. That's not who the Magi finds. Maybe this image comes to mind. Now, this is a famous painting, The Creation of Adam. Don't know who's it by? Oh, the 9 a.m. did better than you there. It was Michelangelo. And it reveals like this great God in creation. Genesis 1 says, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness. It seems appropriate. But that's not who the Magi finds. Neither of these images come close to how God chose to reveal himself. When God became man, it looks more like this. Just take a moment to look at that. The most ridiculous thing of all in this picture is Jesus is not even the big hand. He is the one with those tiny little delicate fingers, helpless, dependent, vulnerable. Jesus of Nazareth, whom Christians hold to be God as man, he came into the world in the same messy and vulnerable way as the rest of us. Gandolfo, in her book, The Power and Vulnerability of Love, says, in the incarnation, which is God become man, the invulnerability of divine love becomes vulnerable human flesh. And the vulnerability of human flesh reveals the invulnerability of divine love. The one who is everything, infinite, boundless, becomes finite and limited, vulnerable and dependent. And yet in this tiny baby who is helpless, needy, exposed, we may encounter the fullness of God's love for us. We read, the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. Jesus turns our world upside down. The incarnation, God becoming man, is just ridiculous. I'm not actually sure we can overemphasize how absurd it is. So run with me here, if you will. Imagine you're having a coffee with me one day, and I reveal a little known fact about myself, which is I really love goldfish. I really love them. But I'm feeling a bit sad today because I speak to my goldfish as I feed them in the pond and I watch over them, but I just don't feel like they really get who I am. You know, they eat my food, they benefit from this loving environment that I've created, but they just don't know me. You'd probably take a sip of your latte and check to see who else was listening. And try and explain to me gently, this is just how the world works. Goldfish, they don't know what people are like. Goldfish can't know people. You would hastily finish the coffee, find an excuse to be away, and then I'd meet you another day, and I'd say, actually, I've got a plan. What I'm going to do is I am going to become a goldfish. I've done some research. We share 64% of our DNA, true fact. I'm already 2/3 a goldfish, so I'm going to become one. You'd tell me I was ridiculous. David, you would say, you're one of the most handsome people I've ever met. Why would you want to look like a goldfish? David, you would say, your memory is phenomenal. Why? You can remember things from 5, sometimes even 6 minutes ago. Sometimes 6. Why would you want to do this? Why would you throw away all of your life, your money, your gifts, your abilities, just to become a goldfish? And now, imagine we've said all of this, and then I went ahead, there's some kind of crazy operation which I underwent, and you came back a few months later and you found me swimming in that pond as a goldfish. You'd think a lot of things, but maybe one thing which you'll be struck by is, you know what? When David said he loved goldfish, he really meant it. But here's the thing, the idea of me becoming a goldfish is less ridiculous than the idea the creator of the world, the infinite, all-powerful God, would be made mortal, a man. It is absurd, and yet he did it. And he did it because he loves us. To become God with us, to make himself known, to save us from the mess that we have got ourselves in, God becomes man. And Jesus doesn't even do it on a grand scale. He's not born in the palace surrounded by healthcare professionals and midwives. He didn't, as I read this week, one early church father suggested, burst forth like a ray of light from Mary's womb. No, he was born with everything that entails. And he was fed by Mary, dependent on her, vulnerable, born in the backwater village of Bethlehem. It's the same humble place in which King David was born, to an unmarried young woman, and he would shortly face a threat to his life from the jealousy and fear of King Herod, who could not understand this type of king. This is our God. This is our King. And he's not like the kings of the world. He's not what we expect. He doesn't display his power on grand scales. He's not like rulers who abuse their power and lord it over the people. No, he comes as a child and as a baby. He comes as one of us, as ordinary as you and me. Jesus turns our world upside down. So how on earth do we respond to such a thing? How can we respond? Here, I think the Magi got it right. They got it really right. After learning that Jesus was not at the palace, they didn't go home disappointed. No, they didn't just change their minds and assume they were wrong, but they continued to seek Jesus out that they might go and worship him. And when they finally found him in this backwater town, met his nobody parents, they didn't give up. They didn't just assume they'd got it all wrong. No, but when they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. And then they opened their treasures and they presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The Magi got it right. You can't bow down low enough for Jesus. You can't worship him enough. Their devotion was wholehearted and their adoration was true. There's no treasure you can give him which he does not deserve. Genuine worship holds nothing back. It's an opening of ourselves and our treasures to God. And the Magi give him 3 gifts, and I think they speak of something we can offer Jesus. So firstly, we have gold. Gold, one of the most valuable materials on earth. Few things are more precious than gold. And gold, it represents the glory and the majesty of God. In Revelation, we read of the New Jerusalem, the new city of God, which is made of pure gold. We read of the elders casting their crowns of gold before the king. It's a costly offering worth a huge amount of money, a gift truly fit for a king. And like the Magi, we can offer to God our earthly resources, what we have. Whatever is precious to us, we can offer to God. Be it our time, our money. We heard earlier last week of the response at St. Mike's from the Gifts Day. And what an amazing way that we can express our worship to God. Because he doesn't need it. He is the God of all creation, and yet he invites us to bring what we have before him and to offer it as worship. If you haven't still given, if you'd like to, there are still opportunities to do so. You can make it an act of worship today. Online, use one of the contactless machines at the end of the service. Because it's amazing that God accepts our gifts as worship. That's not the only way. They also offer frankincense. We don't know frankincense as well in our culture, but it had been very well known to the Israelites. It was burnt every morning and evening on the altar in the temple, and it produced this fragrant smell which would fill the room and fill it with thick white smoke. And this smoke represented the holiness of God. Frankincense declares, holy, holy, holy. And like the Magi, we can declare the holiness of God. It comes second in this list of gifts as it follows. Once we see the glory of God, we recognize his holiness. It's not just as we sing in worship, but it does include that. But it's our whole lives which can carry that fragrance of holiness, a life given to worship as we live each day as holy to God, remembering him in every moment. For the Magi, their whole journey was a fragrant offering to God. They carried that sweet-smelling aroma of devotion as they trekked through months and miles of harsh terrain to reach the King. The wisest thing we can do is to worship. Will we let our lives be a wholehearted offering to him? And finally, we have myrrh. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. First, you encounter his glory, gold. Then you offer your whole self to him as worship, holiness. And then finally, you die to all but him. Myrrh was an embalming oil, and it was used on the bodies of the dead to mask their smell. It speaks of death and decay. And for Jesus, this gift, it foreshadows the cross, in which he would give up everything for our sake so that we might have restored relationship with God. We can offer Jesus myrrh as we choose to give up anything which would lead away from our relationship to God. We choose to become wholehearted, letting go of anything else. The Magi experienced this death to self on their journey. Months of travel, months. And still they pressed on. They came to Jerusalem. They didn't find Jesus, and still they pressed on. They had to die to what others thought of them. What are they doing? They had to die to the very real risk of failure or getting it wrong. Die to the expense of the whole journey. Die to their lives back in Persia in order to encounter the immediate presence and the glory of Jesus. We can offer God myrrh as we choose to let go of anything else. So how may we respond? We bow down low in worship and we offer Jesus our treasure. And to invite the band back up and pray for us. Jesus, I thank you that you reveal yourself to us, and you reveal yourself in vulnerability. God, that you chose to become man, it blows our minds, but we thank you for the love that it reveals. May we know that love. And we offer you ourselves in worship as response. And for some of us today, maybe this looks like offering God our gold. This is a way we could respond in worship, just to give of our earthly resources, whatever that looks like. If I'm speaking and that's what you've been feeling, then I encourage you to act on that, because it's so easy to walk away and think, I'll leave it to another time, just never get round to it. But I encourage you to act on it. For others here today, perhaps you feel called to offer God frankincense, that sense of a life of wholehearted devotion. If that's you, please do come forward for prayer. We would count it a joy to pray with you, and just to pray that your life may be a holy offering to God. And then still others, maybe as I'm speaking, you just resonate with the third gift, with myrrh. That sense to lay down your life to God. Perhaps there's some of us here, and there's things you just know you need to let go of that don't work with your relationship with God. And if that's you, I want to invite you to come forwards for prayer. You don't need to be specific about anything. We're not interested in the particularities, but we would love to pray with you and just share that you want to lay down your life to God. And during this last song, there's going to be a chance to receive prayer ministry as well. I really encourage you to take this opportunity to make it a response of worship to God and to receive prayer. And then finally, maybe there's some people here and you don't yet know Jesus. You don't know Jesus for yourself. And if that's you, you can come empty-handed. Come just as you are and offer Jesus your life. And it's the greatest gift you can give, and he will welcome you with open arms. And if that is you, then if you want to offer Jesus your life for the first time today, then please do come forwards during the next song. I would love to pray for you. Julie would love to pray with you, and we'd just love to support you as you start your journey of faith. But for all of us, let's stand. We are going to respond in a song of worship, recognizing God's glory and his holiness. The prayer ministry team would like to come forwards. If you'd like to receive prayer, please do make your way to either side or at the back to the balcony, and we'd love to pray with you.